Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. Today I am joined by another panelist that will be featured at the DFW Growth Summit on February 22nd. I'm joined today by Steve Kinard Jr. He is the president of the AI Innovation Association. Steve, you want to give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks for the opportunity. This has been an interesting journey the past couple of years for me, and it's really a tremendous time to be having an event like this around innovation because there's such an acceleration that we see. I'm an oil and gas professional by background, really. I'm an energy professional first, and I mention that because there's this confluence where energy is the foundation now of the innovation economy in tech. There's such a boom in data centers and compute. And that's kind of how I got pulled into this, is just the interest in that overlap. I started at the Texas Blockchain Council, which is an industry association that was focused on a lot of that work, the high performance computing that goes into the Bitcoin network. And there was kind of a natural synergy between that work and what we're doing now with AI Innovation Association, in the sense that similarly we're an association for innovative companies that are working in AI, that are working in high performance computing, but we maintain an ethos of pro decentralization, pro open source. Our name has innovation in it. Hopefully that highlights quite obviously that we think that disruption is not only unavoidable, but it's a good thing. And Texas and America should lead in that. And so I encourage everyone, you can go to innovationconnect.ai, innovationconnect.ai. You can sign up, follow us there, and excited to grow the association this year.
Absolutely, absolutely. And these are really exciting times. At the time of this recording, the Texas legislative session is taking place. And as you know, we're kind of speaking briefly, things are heating up. So it's really interesting stuff right now. And I know everyone heard about the Stargate project that just got dropped. And so everyone's talking about that as well. But I think we'll definitely be unpacking a lot of this stuff during the summit. But for now, let's jump right into it if you're
Sure.
prepared. And we'll kick it off here with first question. So, how do we strike a balance between innovation and consumer protection when it comes to AI-driven policies?
I think the way I approach this first and foremost is laying a foundation of first principles that I think align really with American first principles, which is liberty, private property, innovation, and kind of that entrepreneurial mindset. And so I in the association believe strongly that an innovation-based economy where private investment leads is best. Now, the question is a valid one, and there's a valid concern underpinning it that not everything everywhere can or should be allowed. And I think a way that I can respond to this is highlighting what's already going on right now. There's, by my assessment, about 19 bills in the Texas legislature right now related to AI that have been filed. And there's something that really jumps out at me, and I think it's a good thing, and that's 10 of them, most of them, deal with non-consensual images, what some people call deep fakes, and particularly as that pertains to images that depict minors and sexual content of young people. I think everybody can agree that's not only horrific, but a real threat that's already happening. And in fact, not long ago, I went to an event where there was firsthand testimony from young girls that had been the victims of this kind of deep fake imagery. And as a father to a daughter, I said, this absolutely cannot stand.
Hmm.
And so I'm encouraged to see that there's that focus already in the state of Texas at the state level. At the federal level, our Texas Senator Ted Cruz was a leader in terms of tackling this issue. And his Take It Down Act, which requires social media platforms to remove that kind of horrific imagery, has passed with bipartisan and broad support out of the Senate. And so we're going to see that continue to move forward. So that's a really obvious one where I'm really hopeful there can be a rallying of not just bipartisan, but just on a moral basis that everybody should recognize this is something that we need to address. The second one that I can highlight is healthcare. Healthcare is an area, we've long had HIPAA regulations around data and ownership and protecting data. At the same and by the same token, there's tremendous promise from AI technology in biotech and healthcare research and potentially delivering cures for different diseases that people have. and we want that. But I do see a role that the government and regulation is going to play at a higher level uh, in the healthcare industry, even in private research. How that all shakes out, it's going to be fascinating to see in the coming months. But it's clear to me, just from bills that have been filed, discussions that have been had, that that particular industry is a bit of a different category. And the last one that I'll highlight is the government itself. Primarily defense and law enforcement. AI is a technology that's going to touch everything. And so that includes those areas. But those are such important government functions that a higher level of transparency is obviously going to be involved. And as much as I believe in open source innovation, like the Defense Department shouldn't innovate on an open source basis and just publish it to the world. I don't think anybody's advocating for that. And so that discussion is going to be had as well as it pertains to that particular matter. And so I'd highlight those are kind of examples of how we're already starting to see a balance that's coming out of areas that we need to focus on in terms of having clear regulation while keeping a focus on letting innovation continue in all these other areas that maybe aren't in that same kind of category.
Interesting stuff for sure. And I kind of want to sort of keep on that for a moment, I think. What role should local governments play in regulating AI, and how can they collaborate with businesses to drive innovation?
I'm a strong believer in federalism, and what I mean by that is I think our country is strongest when the states in a decentralized matter lead. There are some people that think differently, that the federal government should just control everything. I think that the results we just saw in the most recent election were a repudiation of that way of thinking, centralizing control in Washington, D.C. So I think the states should lead as it pertains to some of these key regulatory discussions. Just today, there was an executive order from President Trump that was very clear in terms of indicating a desire to cut red tape, promote innovation, which is really another way of saying let states, if there are particular regulations, let them debate and make proposals. The federal government should be looking for ways to allow more innovation and decentralization. Now, when you go to like the local level municipalities and counties, I think that we have seen over really the last decade, there's been a lot of growth of the different kind of economic development corporations that we see in different areas that have various and different focuses. I think that Plug and Play might be a part of this event here, which is an entity that started in McKinney with an AI focus. I think that's a great example of creating a space with some support from the city that is designated to attract business and provide events, programming, education, and in some targeted cases, even assistance in starting up a business. And that kind of competition is healthy. At the end of the day, if there's one thing I can point to, and I think this is a place where Texas is strong, is innovation in AI is tied hand in hand with energy. And so if we can continue to grow our energy economy and deliver energy abundance and be a place where you can build and not be mired in permitting disputes for decades, as one is typically in a place like California, then we're going to win. And local municipalities across Texas, I think, already have experience in doing that. So the future is bright.
Very interesting. Lot of insight there, and I cannot wait to unpack these things during our panel. I want to shift a little bit, and I'll come back to some policy, but I want to shift a little bit here. Um, is there fear of AI taking over jobs in DFW? Is it justified, or is this narrative overshadowing its potential to create new opportunities?
There's no doubt there's fear. I think in the same way there was fear when Microsoft Excel came out that the accounting profession would go away. And we know that that didn't happen. So there's always fear when a disruptive technology starts to take off. That's a natural part of the process. On the flip side of that, and I'll give a little bit of just a personal anecdote that I often share with people. When in 2021, kind of retail AI started to take off with ChatGPT and everybody was talking about it. And when I initially kind of played around with that, I had that reaction of, this is a bunch of buzzwords. It doesn't really affect me. I don't have time for it. Well, in my professional life, I've done a fair amount of work translating from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. I lived abroad for a time, and that was work that I did. And so I can tell you that for a long time, the services available on the internet to translate were atrocious. I mean, just basically worthless in a professional setting. And somewhere along the way there, maybe late 2022, as these new models were coming out, they turned a corner and their ability to translate reached a point that was astonishing to me and continues to accelerate. And that was my personal moment where I said, I want to work on this. I want to see where this is going to go because this is really powerful. I give that anecdote because that's my story. I think that everybody, one way or another, is going to have that same story of when they finally realized this isn't a bad thing. It doesn't need to be a bad thing. But to some degree, at least from a professional perspective, you reach a point of evolve or die. If you're going to continue to manually completely translate everything on your own 100% as just a human being, that's ridiculous with the quality that you can get from AI. You also still have to check it, by the way. I catch errors still.
Yeah,
And
so
I
do
don't think
I.
anybody's claiming that the profession of translation will completely disappear. But I think you understand the point that I'm trying to make. So we're in the middle as a society of everyone going through that process. Maybe about half of us have had that aha moment. This is really cool. It's made my life better. I'd like to embrace it. And about half of us are still waiting to get there.
Yeah.
And so that's a process of just playing with it, of encountering something in your professional life that's difficult, mundane, requires a lot of sifting through documents, load it up into a tool and say, hey, summarize this for me.
Yep.
And eventually you get to a point where you're like, wow, that just saved me a couple hours
Yep.
of what would have been right, what would have been hard work. And then that lowers everyone's temperature around this. Oh, we're going to lose our jobs. No, we're not. You're going to become more efficient, more productive, and ultimately be in a position to earn more if you embrace that kind of technology.
No, I agree 1,000%. I mean, even as a marketer and not as a marketer, just as a person, I use all kinds of different AIs, but in particular, I use chat every day.
Yeah.
I mean, not even just for work stuff, but just anything, honestly. It could be trying to figure out where to go to eat and just, maybe giving it some feedback on that kind of stuff or ideas on what to do in an organization that I'm a part of that it's not aligned with my profession necessarily. I use it all the time. So no, yeah, I agree with you completely. Um, so okay, we'll kind of blend in a little bit of what we're talking about now and some policy. Like I said, I want to come back to that a little bit. Do current policies in Texas support or stifle AI innovation? And what changes are needed to keep DFW competitive on a global scale, would you say?
Well, I think in terms of what's happened already in Texas has been a better approach than what we've seen, certainly, probably most disastrously in the European Union. I don't think they lead in anything except passing regulation, which is a sad thing to see. And what I mean by that in terms of the context of policy here in the United States, and maybe most relevant to the event, Texas, is in the last session, really what passed was a committee that started having public hearings around AI. And that's the way, is to have conversations with transparency, with different viewpoints and perspectives. And so that's what came out of the last legislative session in Texas. Again, these were public meetings that anybody could watch. And the way that I can most effectively summarize that was optimistic, but also cautious. And I think that's the way we would like to see AI being rolled out, particularly in government functions. And so, as far as people saying, oh, there's a runaway AI, it's going to take over control of X, Y, or Z function, that's just not happening. I mean, there is a lot of cautious kind of skepticism that is healthy, certainly in the Texas government. Now, in this current session, the evolution of AI has been so fast, there's a lot of debate around private development. I think that's where things are much more complex, potentially much more contentious. But what I will say, I think, is emerging as a good idea that we can continue is to expand the forum to have this discussion and bring best practices forward. There is a bill, House Bill 1709 in Texas, that's pretty far reaching in terms of the implications for AI. And within it, it proposes a Texas Artificial Intelligence Council. And that makes a lot of sense to me. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily direct it to have a certain policy, but we should, as a standing function, I think, as a leading state in technology, have that kind of council where different people can be appointed that bring a diversity of opinion. So I think that's important. I expect that to pass. Another thing I'll highlight that I think is encouraging, that is somewhat unique, at least in that bill and what Texas is doing, is it does specifically recognize open source development. Other bills that have circulated in states didn't have that, or confused it, or just showed a lack of understanding. And a lot of the best technological development that's taken place in other areas has been on the basis of open source, where people share their innovations and then others can innovate on top of that. And to me, that is a form of free speech. And we are a free speech respecting country. And for that reason, I think that recognizing open source as free speech and protecting that is important. And I'm glad to see Texas lead in that way. This bill hasn't had a committee hearing yet. Maybe it will by the time that we have our event. So there's a lot of discussion still to take place, and I think we could spend a lot more time on that. But I'll highlight those two areas that I suspect will be areas of broad consensus where we can continue to be a state that's leading and that is a place where people want to engage. I think that's a good thing. And there are a lot of other states that are going to be filing legislation as well. And I think that's the best way you learn from each other.
Yeah, I agree. I'd second that. I like the idea of the council and such. I like what you said about open source and everyone being able to iterate off of each other. I like that. I guess maybe my bias is coming from being, in the nonprofit space for a long time, in various capacities. And then, as a marketer, I am a huge advocate for collaborative initiatives and strategy. So I love that kind of stuff, community and kind of figuring it out together. I like that. So yeah, I can appreciate that a lot.
I'll tell
Uh,
you, we had a remarkable moment today in terms of this discussion around open source, because we've had a model emerge, um, a large language model, DeepSeek R1, which was actually developed by a Chinese company. And you won't find me every day promoting Chinese companies,
yeah,
believe me.
yeah,
But just today, I have to read this post from Mark Andreessen, who's a co-founder of the largest venture capital firm in the country, A16Z. And he says DeepSeek R1 is one of the most amazing and impressive breakthroughs I've ever seen, and as open source, a profound gift to the world. And so this is a model that's performing at a very high level and doing it at 5% or less of the cost of the top performing ChatGPT model right now in terms of the cost of compute. That's just absolutely remarkable. I can also tell you I've been playing around with it today, and I've gotten results still that are better from some of the other models, X, ChatGPT, Claude, American-based models, that I've been running some stuff through there. So I'm not so sold yet that it's as good, but you don't have to be as good when you're 95% cheaper. I mean,
yeah.
that really is a tremendous breakthrough. And so this is the kind of stuff, you have a discussion one day and then a few days later the world's totally different when something like this happens.
Yeah, yep, for sure. It's moving quickly. It's moving quickly. So one more question here, and I know we're kind of getting down on time here a little bit, but what would you say is the biggest misconception about AI among policymakers and business leaders?
I think it's twofold, but they're interrelated, and it's that it doesn't affect me or my industry.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Uh, and as a follow on to that, I can ignore it, ban it, or not deal with it. There's a lot of, I think, pain and disruption that we're going to go through of people learning that it affects you, it affects your industry, and you don't get to opt out. This is a step change function in human functionality and efficiency of data analysis, and that impacts everyone. In some ways, that's scary. In some ways, it could have some detrimental or bad effects. We need to work through that. But overall, it's not optional. And
yeah,
so that's why I think it's so important to engage in this from a positive mindset, from a techno optimist mindset, which I consider myself an optimist generally in technology. And the particular example I'll give is in education. There's a lot of debate around this curriculum and that one, and a lot of regulations. And I understand the concerns around that. But the education industry is going to be massively disrupted by this. And I'm hopeful that we can embrace that in a good way, because I think the potential is tremendous there. But that is an area where I encounter already kind of a pushback that, well, you can't just not have a teacher. That's not what I'm saying. You're still going to want to have human interaction. Of course, that's critical to developing as a human being. But that you're not going to use AI, I don't think is an option to develop yourself and build marketable skills. I don't think it's an option to say no.
Yeah.
And that's a discussion and a hard one that's coming.
For sure. For sure. Steve, man, I appreciate you, your time, your insights, the commentary. I think this is a fabulous, very necessary conversation. I know I'm producing this event and all, but I really do echo what you said toward the beginning. I think it was that we need to have these forums, have these discussions, and kind of like you were just talking about a moment ago. Um, Creating these opportunities for community to come together and talk about it in the business community, the legislative community, and bringing them together, bringing leaders together like yourself, and talking about these things, exploring them, and kind of troubleshooting. I think is very necessary. I think this is a very timely matter too. I think we're going to get a lot of good information, good insights from some of the other folks that are going to be attending this event. So I'm glad to have you aboard. I'm glad that we got to take this time to chat. And I appreciate your support, man.
Thanks, James. Look, I'm glad to be a part of it, and I do think it'll be a high impact event. So really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Everyone watching, thank you for watching. I hope this is interesting for you. We're going to unpack this and a lot more at the summit. So make sure to get your tickets. You can go to jamessackey.marketing and you can get your ticket there. And we will see you then.
See you there.